Welcome to the National Transportation Safety Board. I'm Jennifer Homendy, and it's an honor to serve as chair of the NTSB. With me today are my board colleagues, Member Bruce Landsberg, Member Michael Graham, and Member Tom Chapman. Today's meeting is open to the public in accordance with the Government in the Sunshine Act. We're here because there's a dual epidemic on our roads, both of which you'll hear a lot about in our discussion today, and both of which are on our most wanted list of transportation safety improvements. The first is speeding, which accounts for about a third of all traffic fatalities. The other is impaired driving, which has been an issue for decades. These deadly behaviors often go hand in hand. Studies show that drivers in fatal crashes who speed are more likely to engage in other risky driving behaviors, such as driving impaired. The crash we're here to discuss is one such example. This morning, we'll deliberate the final investigation report of the multi-vehicle crash that occurred at an intersection in North Las Vegas, Nevada, on January 29th, 2022. Member Chapman served as the board member on scene. The crash was initiated by the driver of a 2018 Dodge Challenger who approached an intersection at a maximum speed of 103 miles per hour, nearly 3 times the posted speed limit. The Dodge driver passed a slow-moving truck in a turning lane, ran a stop sign, entered the intersection on a red traffic signal, and struck the right side of a Toyota Sienna minivan. 4 other vehicles were involved in subsequent impacts. The results were catastrophic. Both people in the Dodge and all 7 occupants of the minivan died. 9 deaths in total. 2 others were injured. The 7 people in the minivan who lost their lives were all members of the same family, heading to their Saturday family dinner. 4 of the victims were children, the youngest of whom was just 5 years old. I'd like to take a moment to address those personally affected by this tragedy. On behalf of the entire agency, please accept our heartfelt condolences for all you've been through. I imagine today is an extremely difficult day. We are truly, truly sorry for your pain, whether you lost a loved one in this crash or were injured in any way, physically or mentally. It just so happens that tomorrow is the World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims. Know that we'll be thinking of you, not just tomorrow, but every single time we advocate to strengthen road safety, so this never happens again. And yet similar tragedies keep happening on our roads. More than 11,000 people died as a result of speeding-related crashes last year, out of a total of nearly 43,000 roadway deaths in the US. And the year before that, more than 12,000 people died, a 14-year high nationally. In Nevada, where this crash took place, there's been what officials are calling an alarming trend. In fact, 29% of all Nevada's roadway fatalities are speeding related. And according to the state, at least 60% of all speeding drivers involved in fatal crashes were also impaired. In just 2 years, state law enforcement officials have issued nearly 50% more citations to drivers traveling at or above 100 miles per hour. One of the things I find most distressing in this case is the driver's history as a repeat offender. In the 17 months preceding the crash, Nevada law enforcement agencies issued speeding citations to the driver 5 times. But because his driver records were inaccurate, he was never identified as a safety risk, never held accountable, despite being the subject of several enforcement actions. We'll explore how this happened in depth later. For now, suffice it to say, this is not only a Nevada problem. Several of the issues we uncovered in this investigation affect other states' ability to identify and track repeat speeding offenders and other high-risk drivers. That's a massive concern because we all know speeding is a problem everywhere in this country. Just this past weekend, speeding led to a mass casualty incident on the roads of Houston. The NTSB is isn't investigating this crash, though many of the circumstances will sound painfully familiar. On Saturday, a speeding driver ran a red light in downtown Houston, causing a multi-vehicle collision that killed 6 people and injured 2 others, one of whom is in critical condition, according to news reports. I can't help but also be reminded of a January 2021 tragedy that we did investigate, one that was caused by an impaired driver who was also speeding. This crash, which occurred in Avenal, California, claimed 9 lives, including that of the incident-involved driver. In total, 2 adults and 7 children were killed. The youngest was just 6 years old. I could go on citing example after example after example of how crashes we've investigated where speeding and impairment played a deadly role. How many more times are we going to have to see the same nightmare play out on our streets? How many more bereaved families and grief-stricken communities do there need to be? And how many deaths will it take before we decide to take seriously actions and then act? If I sound outraged, it's because I am. The North Las Vegas crash is the latest example of a total system failure in U.S. road safety. I say that in the context of the safe system approach, which the NTSB supports as the best way to eliminate deaths and injuries for all road users. In this model, a safe road system is one that builds in many layers of redundancy so that if one layer fails, people are still protected. A key part of the safe system, which many of us will raise, is that everyone shares responsibility in preventing road deaths. We'll soon talk about recommendations specific to this crash, but here's the bottom line. We know what interventions will eliminate not just speeding, but also impaired driving. These strategies the NTSB has long supported to protect safety, like technology to prevent speeding, something we've supported since 2017 for passenger vehicles and even longer for commercial vehicles. That goes back to 2012. We've also spent 5 decades, calling for countermeasures aimed at eliminating impaired driving. Over that time, we've documented impairment as a cause of numerous highway crashes and issued more than 150 safety recommendations to address impaired driving, the latest of which can be found in last year's safety research report issued by the NTSB. We absolutely still need education and enforcement. We also need other layers to protect people in case someone, like the incident driver, engages in risky behavior on our roads. The safe system approach says yes and to every strategy that can save a life or prevent an injury. It's never either or. That's how we get to 0, which is the only acceptable number of roadway deaths. So let's now turn to today's meeting. Each board member has studied the draft report, and we've met individually with the investigative team. This is the first time we've gathered as a board to discuss the report. In a moment, NTSB staff will present the pertinent facts and analysis and summarize their findings in detail. After their presentations, board members will question staff on the key safety issues uncovered during the investigation. These include preventing drug-impaired driving, technology to prevent excessive speed, and countermeasures targeted at repeat offenders. Staff will then propose the relevant findings, probable cause, and safety recommendations for board consideration. Following the incorporation of any amendments voted on today, the final report will be available on our website in just a few weeks. The public docket for this investigation was released on January 25th of 2023 and contains over 500 pages of additional relevant material. It's available on our website at ntsb.gov. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the North Las Vegas Police Department for their collaboration with us on scene and their role as a party to our investigation. While they're not part of the analysis, parties are crucial in helping us develop the facts around an investigation. I'd also like to acknowledge the following organizations for their role in the response and for working with us over the course of our investigation: Clark County Combined Communications Center, North Las Vegas Fire Department, City of North Las Vegas Department of Public Works, Medic West Ambulance, University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, and Clark County Office of the Coroner and Medical Examiner. I'll now ask Deputy Managing Director for Investigations, Brian Curtis, to introduce members of the NTSB team participating in today's meeting. Good morning, Mr. Curtis.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Homendy. My only administrative announcement this morning is a reminder for the meeting participants to silence all electronic devices at this time. I'll now introduce staff for today's meeting. Unless otherwise noted, staff are from the Office of Highway Safety. Robert Malloy, Director for the Office of Highway Safety. Brian Bergonia, Investigator in Charge. Dr. Taran Kayagil, Medical Officer from the Office of Research and Engineering. Ellen Lee, Project Manager. Catherine Catania, Deputy Director from the Office of Safety Recommendations and Communications. William McMurray, General Counsel for the NTSB. Barbara Check, Director for the Office of Research and Engineering. Robert Squire, Technical Reconstruction. Jenna Price, National Resource Specialist from the Office of Research and Engineering. Julie Perot, Recommendations Specialist from the Office of Safety Recommendations and Communications. Casey Blaine, Deputy General Counsel for the NTSB. Thomas Barth, Chief of Special Investigations and running the audio-visual equipment today. Lysandra Gary Vega, Chief of Report Development, and Monica Mitchell, Report Editor. The presentations will begin with an investigation overview by the investigator in charge, Brian Begonia. Mr. Begonia.
Good morning, Chair Homendy and members Landsberg, Graham, and Chapman. This morning, staff will present on a multi-vehicle crash involving a Dodge Challenger running a red traffic signal and colliding with multiple vehicles within an intersection. On the afternoon of January 29th, 2022, at about 3:12 p.m., a 2018 Dodge Challenger passenger car was traveling northbound on North Commerce Street in North Las Vegas, Nevada. The drug-impaired Challenger driver had not stopped at a posted stop sign at the previous intersection with Brooks Avenue and was accelerating as he approached the traffic-controlled intersection with West Cheyenne Avenue. The Challenger entered the intersection on a red traffic signal, which had been red for 29 seconds, and struck the right side of a Toyota Sienna minivan traveling eastbound on West Cheyenne Avenue. 4 additional vehicles traveling on West Cheyenne Avenue were involved in subsequent impacts. This is a post-crash aerial view of the intersection. The red arrow indicates the northbound direction of travel for the Dodge Challenger on North Commerce Street. The yellow arrow shows the eastbound direction of travel for the Toyota Sienna on West Cheyenne Avenue. This slide illustrates the Dodge Challenger's increasing speed as it approached the busy intersection. 5 seconds prior to impact, the Challenger was traveling 88 miles per hour, and it continued to constantly accelerate until a speed of 103 miles per hour was reached as it collided with the minivan, without ever applying the brakes. The traffic signal for the Challenger was showing red during this entire 5-second acceleration time. As we discuss the driver's history in more detail in a later presentation, it will become apparent that he was a habitual traffic offender. This was the Dodge Challenger driver's view as he traveled north on North Commerce Street and approached the intersection with West Cheyenne Avenue. North Commerce is a straight road, and there are no line of sight obstructions. The traffic signal could be seen for at least 3,500 feet. These 3D scans show the catastrophic damage to the right side of the Toyota Sienna and the front of the Dodge Challenger. The damage to the rear of the Dodge is due to subsequent vehicle impacts. The collision between the northbound Dodge Challenger and the eastbound Toyota Sienna initiated a series of impacts involving 4 additional vehicles traveling on West Cheyenne Avenue: an eastbound Ford Fusion, a westbound Hyundai Tucson, a westbound Chevy Malibu, and a westbound Mercedes GLE SUV. As a result of the crash, 9 passenger vehicle occupants, 2 in the Dodge and 7 in the Toyota, were fatally injured, and 2 occupants in the other vehicle sustained minor to serious injuries. 4 other vehicle occupants were uninjured. This slide lists the on-scene and the investigative staff. This slide lists the staff who developed the investigation report product. The party to the investigation was the North Las Vegas Police Department. As a result of our investigation, the NTSB established that the following factors did not cause or contribute to the crash: the mechanical condition of the Dodge, actions of drivers of vehicles other than the Dodge, weather and visibility, and finally, the investigation found that the emergency responders were swiftly dispatched, surviving passengers were quickly transported from the scene, and appropriate communication protocols were followed. In summary, the emergency response was timely and adequate. Safety issues identified in this investigation include preventing drug-impaired driving, the need for technology to prevent speeding, and the need to develop countermeasures to reduce speeding recidivism. Staff has prepared presentations on these topic areas. Dr. Cahill will begin with his presentation on the Dodge driver's drug impairment.
Good morning, Chair Homendy and members of the board. I will provide an overview of the Dodge driver's toxicology results, which included positive findings of cocaine and phencyclidine. Phencyclidine is also known as PCP. I will describe cocaine and PCP and relate their effects to the Dodge driver's impairment in this crash. Following the crash, NMS Labs performed toxicology testing of postmortem specimens from the Dodge driver at the request of the Clark County Office of the Coroner Medical Examiner. Additionally, the NTSB arranged for separate specimens to be sent to the Federal Aviation Administration Forensic Sciences Laboratory for toxicological testing. Both laboratories detected cocaine and PCP in the Dodge driver's blood at the concentrations shown in the table. Cocaine and PCP were also both found in liver tissue and urine specimens. Additionally, 2 inactive metabolites of cocaine were detected, as was levamisole. Levamisole is sometimes added to illicitly produced cocaine and may heighten cocaine's effects. Other detected substances included the prescription medication gabapentin. Gabapentin may be used to treat conditions including nerve pain and seizure disorder, and may also be misused recreationally. Gabapentin is potentially impairing, sometimes causing sedation and dizziness. This investigation was unable to determine if gabapentin effects worsened the Dodge driver's impairment. The Dodge driver's toxicology results indicated that he had used cocaine. Cocaine is a Schedule II controlled substance under federal law. Schedule II drugs, substances, or chemicals are defined as drugs with a high potential for abuse, with use potentially leading to severe psychological or physical dependence. Cocaine is a powerful central nervous system stimulant and may be used by a variety of routes, including smoking, snorting, and injection. Cocaine rapidly produces effects including euphoria, excitation, general arousal, dizziness, increased focus, and alertness. At higher doses, psychosis, confusion, fear, antisocial behavior, and aggressiveness may occur. Late effects, as cocaine is eliminated, may include depression, agitation, drug craving, sedation, fatigue, and insomnia. Effects of cocaine on driving most commonly include speeding, loss of control, high-risk behavior, poor impulse control, aggression, and inattention. Cocaine use also increases the risk of having a fatal motor vehicle crash. The average peak blood level of cocaine after a single dose is typically about 200 to 400 nanograms per milliliter. However, cocaine levels measured in blood do not directly predict impairment due to multiple factors. Among these, heavy users may develop some tolerance to cocaine effects. Additionally, the cocaine level in a blood specimen may continue to decrease after the specimen is collected. In this crash, the Dodge driver had cocaine detected at 394 nanograms per milliliter in his blood by the FAA laboratory. The Dodge driver's toxicology results also indicated that he had used PCP. PCP, like cocaine, is a Schedule II controlled substance under federal law. PCP is a powerful hallucinogen and may be used by a variety of routes, including smoking, snorting, and injection. The effects of PCP are dose-dependent and may include agitation, bizarre or violent behavior, feelings of invulnerability, disorientation, distorted perception, disordered thinking, and diminished coordination. In one study, blood levels of PCP associated with arrests for erratic driving ranged from 10 nanograms per milliliter to 188 nanograms per milliliter. In general, measured PCP levels do not directly predict impairment. In this crash, the Dodge driver had PCP measured at 19 nanograms per milliliter in blood by the FAA laboratory. Based on the Dodge driver's toxicology results, and because his driving behavior at the time of the crash was consistent with some of the known signs of impairment from cocaine and PCP, such as aggression, poor impulse control, and risk-taking behavior, staff determined that the Dodge driver was impaired by effects of cocaine and PCP at the time of the crash. This concludes my presentation. Ms. Ellen Lee will give the next presentation, and she will discuss the topic of preventing drug-impaired driving and excessive speeding.
Good morning. In this presentation, I will begin by describing the Dodge driver's actions on the day of the crash. I will then discuss drug-impaired driving prevention and countermeasures to prevent speeding, with a focus on speed mitigation technology, known as Intelligent Speed Assistance, or ISA. I will describe the potential for ISA to mitigate crashes such as the North Las Vegas crash, as well as potential challenges to widespread adoption of ISA. Leading up to the crash, surveillance video showed that the Dodge driver passed a slow-moving commercial truck in an area of the roadway that had a single lane in each direction and a center turn lane. He ran a stop sign and continued to accelerate up to nearly 3 times the speed limit before reaching the intersection and entering against a red light. Although the specific reasons for the driver's actions on the day of the crash are unknown, he was under the influence of cocaine and PCP and also had a history of high-risk driving behavior. His driving history will be discussed further in the next presentation. Impaired driving is a significant nationwide problem. However, the extent of driving while impaired by drugs other than alcohol is not well understood because of inconsistencies in the collection, testing, coding, and reporting of data. In 2022, NTSB published a safety research report examining the crash risk associated with different drugs, the prevalence of potentially impairing drugs, and the need to improve drug-impaired driving laws, enforcement, and data collection. As a result of the 2022 safety research report, the NTSB issued several recommendations, including H2239 to the states, to complete an assessment using the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's Drug-Impaired Driving Criminal Justice Evaluation Tool. This tool was developed to assist states and other governmental jurisdictions with identifying program strengths and opportunities for improvements. The evaluation tool covers many facets of an impaired driving program, including law enforcement, prosecution, judiciary, community supervision, toxicology, treatment, emergency medical services, data, legislation, and communications. In response to the recommendation, Nevada requested that NHTSA conduct a comprehensive, on-site, multidisciplinary program assessment. The assessment identified strengths, weaknesses, and recommendations for improvement. Nevada then developed an impaired driving program plan and has already begun moving forward with actions recommended by the program assessment. In summary, Nevada has taken recent action to address the problem of impaired driving and is currently implementing improvements to its impaired driving program. As a result, the NTSB recently classified safety recommendation H2239 closed acceptable alternate action for the state of Nevada. Speeding continues to be one of the most common factors causing motor vehicle crashes in the United States. The NTSB has investigated many speeding-related crashes, similar to this crash, in which the driver was traveling far above the speed limit. Traditional countermeasures for speeding have been grouped into three categories: engineering, enforcement, and education. Nevada's 2022 Speed Management Action Plan identifies countermeasures and actions in each of these categories being taken by the Nevada Department of Transportation and partner agencies to reduce speeding and speed-related crashes. As previously described, in the North Las Vegas crash, the Dodge driver was traveling nearly 3 times the legal speed limit of 35 miles per hour. The driver was impaired and had exhibited a pattern of high-risk behavior. The traditional countermeasures of education and enforcement were not successful at keeping this driver from speeding. Enforcement will be further discussed in the next presentation. In addition, the Dodge driver was traveling on North Commerce Street, which had no indication of a speeding-related crash problem. The street would be unlikely to be prioritized for engineering changes. In-vehicle technologies, such as Intelligent Speed Assistance or ISA, show promise in preventing drivers from speeding. ISA is a system designed to help ensure that a vehicle does not exceed a safe or legally enforced speed. ISA systems determine the speed limit by comparing a vehicle's global positioning system location against a database of posted speed limits, and by using onboard cameras to recognize speed limit signs. ISA systems can be passive or active. Passive ISA systems issue alerts to the driver when the speed limit is exceeded, but the driver is fully responsible for slowing the vehicle. Active systems include those that increase resistance on the accelerator when the speed limit is exceeded, and those that electronically limit the speed of a vehicle, fully preventing drivers from exceeding the speed limit. Research on the effectiveness of ISA to reduce speeding shows that both passive and active systems can offer clear safety benefits, such as reduced mean driving speed, speed variability, and the proportion of time that the speed limit was exceeded. In this crash, because the Dodge driver was impaired and had a history of high-risk behavior, we are uncertain whether a passive ISA system providing only speed warnings could have resulted in the driver reducing the car's speed. However, an active ISA system that can intervene independently of the driver could more effectively slow the car and protect the vehicle occupants and other road users. Around the world, ISA is becoming more widespread. The European New Car Assessment Program, Euro NCAP, first introduced an evaluation for ISA in 2009. Other global NCAPs currently also evaluate speed prevention technology. In addition, in 2022, the European Union issued a rule mandating a passive ISA system on all new cars. In the United States, several manufacturers offer optional ISA capabilities, often on a limited subset of models or only when buyers purchase certain option packages. Some of these offerings are marketed towards teen drivers and their parents. Some of the available systems function only when other systems, such as adaptive cruise control, are engaged. There are no federal safety standards for ISA, and ISA is not included in the US NCAP. In 2017, the NTSB issued recommendation H1724 to NHTSA to incentivize ISA by, for example, including ISA in US NCAP. Since that time, NHTSA has taken limited action towards encouraging or advancing ISA adoption. In 2022, NHTSA published a request for comment on US NCAP, but ISA systems were only listed as one of 6 technologies NHTSA was considering for its 10-year roadmap. The surest way to achieve broad deployment of ISA is to require that new vehicles be equipped with these systems. While there are some current challenges to ISA implementation that will need to be overcome, action can be taken now to start to address some of these barriers. Public tolerance of speeding is generally believed to be a barrier to ISA implementation in the United States. High tolerance of speeding correlates with low acceptance of speed mitigation technology. One solution to this is through wider voluntary deployment by automakers, which will allow U.S. drivers to gain experience with ISA systems. In addition, although a passive system may not have mitigated the North Las Vegas crash, a phased deployment approach that introduces passive ISA with the goal of progressing to active ISA in the future may be beneficial to increase public understanding and use of the technology. Coordinated media campaigns can also help to improve public acceptance of ISA by increasing awareness of the capabilities and benefits of the technology to mitigate speeding. NHTSA has done these types of campaigns in the past on other topics. There are other challenges for ISA, such as lack of map standardization and inconsistencies in highway signage, but ongoing work by the Federal Highway Administration aimed at helping transportation agencies integrate automated driving systems into the overall transportation system may help with these issues. Staff found that the Dodge driver's history and actions on the day of the crash showed repeated disregard for safety and traffic laws. We also found that an active ISA system may have mitigated the severity of the North Las Vegas crash. Broad deployment of ISA will help to reduce speeding and speeding-related crashes. Wider voluntary deployment of ISA and strategies to improve public acceptance will facilitate development of federal safety standards. For these reasons, 2 recommendations are proposed to NHTSA to require on new passenger vehicles ISA systems that, at a minimum, warn the driver when the vehicle exceeds the speed limit, and to educate the public about the capabilities and benefits of ISA to mitigate speeding. In addition, staff proposed a recommendation to passenger vehicle manufacturers to voluntarily install ISA as standard equipment on all new vehicles. Finally, staff proposes reiterating H1724 to NHTSA. This concludes my presentation. Mr. Brian Burgonier will give the next presentation, and he will discuss the issue of repeat speeding offenders.
Good morning. In this presentation, I will discuss the Dodge driver's license history, including details about the number of speeding tickets and the additional traffic violations staff found in court documents. Only 1 speeding ticket was documented on his official driving record. 6 others were not. Then I will discuss the challenges associated with identifying repeat speeding offenders due to these inaccurate records and how it is difficult for prosecutors and judges to have a complete driver's history. Finally, I will talk about vehicle-based speeding countermeasures that may help reduce speeding recidivism. The Dodge driver's record shows a history of speeding violations, driving under suspension, and driving under the influence. In the 1980s, he was arrested twice for DUI in Indiana. Between 1992 and 2017, he was convicted in Nevada 5 times for driving while his license was suspended, had 3 speeding convictions, and had 1 conviction each for driving without liability insurance, failing to obey traffic control devices, and failing to signal. However, at the time of the crash, his official 10-year driving record had only 1 moving violation documented, a speeding ticket issued in April of 2017, and he had no active demerit points. Evidence was obtained from local court record systems showing that the driver had received additional traffic citations that were not documented on his official record. 4 of these speeding violations, highlighted in yellow, were reduced to non-moving violations, illegal parking, by the court. For the other 2, he was found guilty of speeding violations of 11 to 20 miles an hour over the speed limit. Neither of these tickets were yet reflected on his official Nevada driving record, nor had any demerit points been assigned. There are many reasons why violations may not appear on a driving record. For example, delays may occur in reporting convictions from courts to the DMV. Some convictions are still done on paper and are then added to the record as staffing resources allow. Also, some courts do not enter a conviction until a fine is paid, which can result in a long delay when an offender is on a payment plan, as was the case with this driver for 2 of his recent speeding convictions. In addition, traffic courts have wide latitude when adjudicating traffic offenses. Violations dropped or altered during plea agreements are not included in the final record. This will result in a driver's official record appearing much better than it should, which will benefit the driver when attempting to make another agreement with another court. This also means that the insurance companies and potential employers see an inaccurate driving record. In the case of the Dodge driver, there is evidence that at least 4 plea agreements had been made in the previous 5 years that affected his official driving record. When his speeding charges were reduced to non-moving violations, they did not appear on the driver's record, which allowed different courts to continue to treat him as a new offender. A recent study by the National Academy of Sciences examined each state's record systems and found that delays in reporting convictions and plea agreements that modify the original charge occur in many states, not just Nevada. Research shows that repeat offenders are more likely to cause crashes. Therefore, timely and accurate identification of these high-risk drivers is a critical step in targeting the speeding problem. The National Academies found that identification and tracking of high-risk drivers can be achieved through a statewide electronic system, and that the data should be shared throughout the entire legal process. This would need to include all case dispositions, such as plea agreements and reduced sentencing, thus better ensuring that driver records relied upon in future adjudications are accurate. NTSB provides substantial guidance to states regarding their highway safety plans and traffic records programs. While this guidance discusses specialized tracking systems for DUI offenders, it does not currently provide similar guidance for repeat speeding offenders. NTSB and others have found that repeat speeding offenders may be difficult to deter because they tend to be more resistant to traditional countermeasures and interventions aimed at speeding. States address speeding by increasing penalties for repeat offenses. However, this alone has not been shown to be effective. Action both by the federal government and states can help to address this problem. States have the flexibility to identify highway safety problems based on their own data, while NTSB can more broadly examine the problem of speeding recidivism. As discussed earlier, ISA will benefit all drivers. However, there may be additional value for certain drivers, such as repeat speeding offenders, based on small studies conducted to date. To more broadly determine the efficacy of ISA for repeat offenders, pilot programs could be developed that would require individuals convicted of speeding to use ISA devices. Alcohol ignition interlock programs could serve as a model for how to develop such a program for speeders. Recently, New York City implemented active ISA technology in 50 city fleet vehicles as part of a new pilot program. The program uses an aftermarket active ISA system that restricts a vehicle's maximum speed, preventing it from exceeding local speed limits within a set threshold. Although full results are not yet published, the city announced positive preliminary results of the program, including 99% compliance with local speed limits and a 36% reduction in hard braking events. Although this pilot program focused on city-owned vehicles rather than repeat speeding offenders, it demonstrates the capacity of local jurisdictions to implement an ISA program similar to what could be developed to target repeat offenders. Staff found that because the Dodge driver was a repeat speeding offender, he was more likely to cause a fatal crash. We found that timely and accurate identification of high-risk drivers is a critical step in targeting the speeding problem, but inaccurate driver records can reduce the likelihood that repeat offenders are identified. Electronic citation data tracking systems can help identify high-risk drivers. Staff found that evidence-based countermeasures targeting speeding recidivism are lacking. ISA systems have the potential to reduce speed among these repeat offenders. For these reasons, 3 recommendations are proposed to NTSB. Update the uniform guidelines for state highway safety programs to include tracking for repeat speeding offenders, develop countermeasures to reduce speeding recidivism, and develop guidelines to assist states in implementing pilot ISA interlock programs for high-risk drivers who speed. In addition, staff proposed a recommendation to the states to include in their highway safety plan elements to identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism. This concludes staff's presentations, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Burgonier and Dr. Kayagil, Mrs. Lee, Dr. Price, and Mr. Squire for your presentations and for your excellent work on these issues. We'll now turn to board member questions focused on the three major safety issues that we identified in the investigation. The first one is preventing drug-impaired driving. The second one will be focused on technology to prevent excessive speed. The third one will be focused on countermeasures targeted at repeat speeding offenders. Before we consider the draft findings, we'll also entertain a final round of questions on any other safety issue that board members would like to raise. The purpose of this discussion and focused deliberation is to highlight those areas where we believe we can make the biggest difference to improve safety. Some members may have comments on every safety issue, some may not. So we'll begin the discussion on the first issue, preventing drug-impaired driving, starting with Member Landsberg.
Thank you, Chair Homendy. First, I just want to comment, I share your outrage on this. One additional area that we might add into the problems here are distracted driving as well, and they cause very similar types of events. A question here, I guess, NHTSA fatality analysis reporting system collects data on alcohol and other drugs, but they don't test for everything that the FAA's testing lab does. And there's also inconsistency because first responders have different protocols, and so considerable data may be lost. What information do we need, and how does the legalization of cannabis, where impairment level, at least currently, is hard to measure, affect highway safety? And I guess that would probably be addressed by Dr. Kayagil.
Thank you for that question, Member Landsberg. I would also ask Dr. Price if she has some insight on that.
Of course.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Member Landsberg. Excellent question. So as mentioned in the report, currently our understanding of drug prevalence in fatal crashes and crashes is quite limited. And as you alluded to, there are problems with that data because in general, states have kind of a patchwork of approaches to the types of toxicological testing and analyses and reporting that they do. You mentioned the FAA labs, which do extremely comprehensive testing, and that type of testing might be beyond the reach of an average state. However, in our recent report, our safety report on drug-impaired driving, NTSB called on all states to start using a standard, an ANSI, American National Standards Institute standard that encourages states to test for a minimum of 33 common potentially impairing drugs or their metabolites. And so we believe that if all states can start applying this standard, we can have a better understanding of drug use and drug impaired driving.
So is that H-22-39? Do I remember that correctly?
I believe it is H-2240.
Okay, all right. Well, we have number 39, which was intended to improve the drug-impaired driving knowledge issued to all 50 states. And can you tell me generally what responses we've received?
Certainly. H-2239 was a recommendation that we also issued in 2022 to all of the states. And that recommendation asked states to use a NHTSA-developed online tool, the Drug Impaired Driving Criminal Justice Evaluation Tool. And the goal of that was to do a self-assessment, to look at different aspects. They had 10 different topic areas where states or communities can do a self-assessment of how they're handling drug-impaired driving, and look for gaps and benchmark against best practices. We've had responses from 24 states and the District of Columbia on that, and many states, including Nevada, have taken steps to do those self-evaluations and develop plans for improvement. And in this report, we mentioned how because of the work that Nevada has done, the board voted to close acceptable alternate action, that recommendation.
Okay, I do note that Nevada is now taking steps. One last quick question here. I noticed that the impaired safe driving issue funding comes exclusively from NHTSA, and the penalties and fees, if any, that convicted impaired driving offenders pay apparently are not used to support the program. And it looks like maybe too many states are using the traffic fines as a revenue enhancer for their general fund. Any understanding or question as to why that might be?
So in the case of Nevada, we do note that NHTSA, in their assessment of Nevada's driving or impaired driving program, did find that they did not use their fines to improve their impaired driving program. And so that is noted in the report. So NHTSA made a recommendation to Nevada to correct that. We do not have a detailed understanding of where the fines are going. We did not investigate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll have some additional questions in a moment.
Great, thank you. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair Hamady. I think my first question is for Dr. Cahill. We know pretty well that the alcohol level in blood is, we have a good system to be able to predict impairment with alcohol, do we not?
Yes, the impairing effects of alcohol are relatively well understood.
Okay. Can you describe for those that are watching how difficult it is to predict impairment with drugs other than alcohol?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. The ability to predict impairing effects of alcohol is based on a number of features that are fairly unique to ethanol alcohol as a substance, including the predictable way that it's distributed through the body, the predictable way that's eliminated, and its well-studied effects. So with many other substances, that's not the case. There is not a direct correlation between the level and the impairing effects, and the way that the drug behaves in the body is less easy to look at and back extrapolate from, or draw those same types of connections to specific impairment that we would be able to do with ethanol.
Great, thank you for that. I think this next question is for Dr. Price. In 2022, we already talked about the NTSB published report on alcohol, other drugs, and multi-drug use among drivers. What were some of the needs or improvements that were suggested from this report?
Thank you for that question. As I alluded to a moment ago, Member Graham, one of the greatest needs is to have more consistent and better data collection or testing of drivers who are arrested for driving impaired. For example, in some communities, if a driver is arrested and tests at an illegal limit for alcohol, subsequent testing is not completed, something known as stop testing. So that's an example where that community may not be aware of emerging drug drug impaired driving problems, because one of the things that our study showed is that among drivers who are arrested, about half of them had more than one potentially impairing substance on board. And so it's a missed opportunity both on a community level and on an individual level for people who may need treatment. So we tapped into that issue in our report. We also talked about ways that we can strengthen laws and facilitate law enforcement, and also provide information to the public about the impairing effects of certain drugs, including prescription and over-the-counter drugs, which also have, in some cases, the potential to impair driving.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I appreciate you pointing that out. I have a couple more questions, and I probably don't have enough time, so I'll come back to that to another round. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Graham. Member Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to all of our team for their good work to investigate this truly devastating tragedy. In the North Las Vegas crash, lives were lost to perhaps the most persistent killers on our roads, and that's excessive speed and impairment. It's truly my most fervent hope that our investigation and the proposed recommendations we'll discuss later today will help ensure that others will be spared the pain and the grief of those who lost loved ones or who were injured as a result of this terrible crash. The Dodge driver's toxicology was positive for cocaine and PCP. Both are Schedule II controlled substances, as you discussed in the presentation. In 2022, we issued our safety research report on multiple use among drivers, multiple drug use among drivers, and that report includes a list of NTSB investigations of crashes in which drug impairment was a cause or a contributing factor. In our 2022 report, I believe that 12 investigations were listed. Among those investigations, again, these are NTSB investigations, how often was cocaine and PCP found in the systems of the involved drivers?
Member Chapman, I'd be happy to answer that question. That's correct. We did list about a dozen investigations that NTSB has investigated that involved alcohol and other drugs. And if memory serves, I believe that in about 4 of those investigations that cocaine or cocaine metabolites were detected in drivers. In none of them was PCP found. However, the whole notion that we were consistently finding drugs, and in some cases multiple drugs, is what led us to do the study that I mentioned. And I'd be happy to elaborate on the amount of the prevalence that we found in the study samples as well, if you would like.
Thank you. We may come back to that. I recognize we only investigate a handful of highway crashes, so this is an admittedly limited sample. Does it give us enough where we can make observations about the prevalence of impairment or even the presence of these 2 particular Schedule II substances?
No, sir. I don't think that because NTSB only looks at a small number of crashes compared to the enormous scale of crashes on our roadways. That's one of the reasons why we decided we needed to do a more aggregate look at the problem. And as I alluded to before in my answers, there isn't really on the national level great data about the prevalence. So in our study, we looked at 4 communities where they are doing very comprehensive testing of arrested drivers, so that we could see a snapshot into the true prevalence of some of these drugs. And so the most commonly found drugs that we found in our study were alcohol and cannabis. Stimulants were third most common, though, and cocaine in particular was found in between 7 and 9% of the arrested drivers in the study. PCP was much lower. It was around a little less than 1% of drivers.
And I think you mentioned this already, but one of the challenges here is the lack of data, and this gets us to the stop testing policy that many states employ, and I understand the reasons for that. There are costs involved in testing beyond alcohol, but the problem is we're losing that data. We don't know how prevalent these problems are, and that was one of the conclusions of the 2022 report, correct?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned in response to Member Landsberg's question, we're not necessarily calling on states to test for every potentially impairing substance, but rather there is a standard list of about 33 potentially impairing, commonly used potentially impairing substances and their metabolites. And we think if all states could apply that, we'd have a much better understanding of the problem.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a few more questions. I'll come back for those in another round.
Thank you very much, Member Chapman. What is Nevada doing specifically on drug impaired driving? And the reason why I ask, I reviewed their highway safety plan. The latest I saw online was 2021. I also reviewed their strategic highway safety plan for 2021 through 2025 in terms of impairment and speeding. So I'm wondering if you could talk just on the impairment side, what they're doing. I know they're doing a lot on alcohol, and it seems like marijuana, but for other drugs.
So as part of their efforts to develop their impaired driving program plan and implement some of the actions that NHTSA recommended to them through the assessment, they have a number of actions underway. And a few examples are they're working to improve their law enforcement, prosecutor, and judicial training for DUI, and that includes other drugs besides alcohol. They're looking at preventing recidivism of DUI offenders by incorporating early intervention tools. So things like evaluation of drug or alcohol dependencies and looking at behavior change therapies. And they've also begun to explore ideas that will improve transparency in the adjudication process in terms of plea agreements and things like that.
Anything on testing? I note that they have a task force on impaired driving. Anything on testing that they're doing?
I do not recall what they're doing on testing.
Okay. And you mentioned training. Are they training prosecutors and judges?
Yes, that's our understanding.
Okay, great. I have more questions, but I will hold them. Member Landsberg.
Just one more question on this. We have driving interlock devices for alcohol detection. Is there any technology that would help us to, significantly enforce the detection of PCPs and cocaine, or some of the more popular recreational substances like we do have with alcohol?
Thank you, Member Landsberg. Yes, you correctly note that for alcohol offenders, you can put interlocks on a car that will prevent those cars from starting if a certain level of alcohol is present in that driver's breath. Currently, there are not other analogous technologies for other drugs. However, in 2022, one recommendation that NTSB made to NHTSA was to require on new vehicles technologies that could stop impaired driving, and that could be an alcohol detection system, or it could involve a driver monitoring system that would monitor driver behaviors or driving behaviors. In the case of this report, I think the focus on the behavior of speeding and detecting and controlling that, speeding being a behavior that is often associated with impairment, is one way to address that issue.
Very good. Thank you. Chair, no further questions in this subject area.
Thank you, Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate Ms. Lee pointing out that NTSB did conduct a comprehensive on-site multidisciplinary impaired driving program assessment, vice what we asked from the evaluation tool that NTSB did. And I would like to ask you again, what were some of the recommendations that came out of that? Do you have those offhand?
I don't have them in front of me, but
Yeah.
They included things like what Member Landsberg mentioned earlier, which was to better utilize their funding, included stuff about DUI recidivism, and the improved training. I can't remember whether that was a recommendation from NTSB or if that was something Nevada initiated on their own.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know I kind of caught you off guard there, but
Yeah,
I think it's
okay.
important to point out that there were spanning enhancements to the criminal justice system. I know you talked about some of the training and the screening and tracking of alcohol and other drug offenders. And data collection also was a big thing that came out of that they needed to work on. And I think we pointed that out very clearly here, that they had some deficiencies in every one of these areas that needed to be addressed. So that's all the questions I have on this subject. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Graham. Member Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a couple of questions about our recommendation with regard to use of the NTSB drug impaired driving criminal justice evaluation tool, but I think we've covered that pretty thoroughly. Dr. Price, I just wanted, you brought up the issue of driver monitoring systems, and I'm an advocate and a fan of that technology. I know it's still evolving, but I think one of the benefits there is not only is it potentially helpful with regard to detecting drug impairment, but it's helpful potentially with regard to other impairing conditions, fatigue and distraction and that sort of thing. Would you mind commenting further on the potential benefits of driver monitoring systems as that technology evolves?
Yes, certainly, Member Chapman. So driver monitoring systems are something that is on certain vehicles today. So for example, it might potentially track a driver's steering behavior, how well they're staying within the lanes, or braking behaviors, or it may there may be some that track eye behaviors, like you were mentioning about identifying drowsy driving. Now, driver monitoring systems, of course, require some driving to take place before the monitoring can take place and before information can be shared with the driver to potentially tell them that they're not driving well, and requires them to potentially take steps to cease driving. There are other technologies in development, as I alluded to, that could detect, for example, passive alcohol vapor from exhaled breath or from the skin. And those types of technologies could potentially detect and prevent driving before the driving takes place. I think that the fact that we've called on NTSB to look at this issue and to require systems that can prevent this, all of those things, all of those different types of technologies, as I understand, are under consideration in potentially a suite of those technologies.
And I know that this crash involved drugs and not alcohol, but alcohol is still by far our biggest challenge in terms of impaired driving, correct?
Yes, sir. Absolutely, that is correct. Although we've seen some improvements over the years, alcohol is still the #1 drug that we see in terms of causing impaired driving crashes.
So our 2022 recommendation in connection with the awful Avenel crash called for essentially a potential combination of tools, one being alcohol detection in the vehicle, and the other being potentially driver monitoring systems. Those could be used in combination with each other. And your point about driver monitoring systems requiring some driving before impairment could be detected, with alcohol still being the biggest problem, the detection of alcohol prior to driving is the main advantage of alcohol detection systems, correct?
Certainly, and with any system, the sooner the detection can take place, the better. And so I think that in evaluating these types of systems and determining which ones should be required, the types of things that one would consider is whether they can detect effectively, and then once they make the detection, how they can prevent driving from occurring or give information to the driver that would help them to make the right decision.
Thanks to all of you. I have a very bright reflection from the sun here in my eyes. I'm going to sign off and go take care of that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Member Chapman. You know, my predecessor, Chairman Sumwalt, used to say the disadvantage of going last is everybody's asked your questions. But I do have one question. I'm curious how other countries deal with alcohol impairment and drug impaired driving, particularly in Europe, you know, everything from what are the limits and then how they're dealing with drug impaired driving now. Anyone? Would anyone like to take that? Bruce wants to take it.
I might answer that.
No, Bruce.
In the Scandinavian countries, they take impaired driving and alcohol extremely seriously, and I believe their limit is 0.02. And if you get caught, there is a 1-year suspension of your license, and there is 10% of your salary, your annual salary, is forked over to the state so that this never happens again. And usually it's for several years. So they take it much more seriously. And as a result, let me put it this way, the ride sharing programs are a lot more popular than they are in this country. So unfortunately, we don't seem to have quite the same enthusiasm.
Exactly. And Member Landsberg is going to join the Office of Highway Safety now. Yes,
thank you, Member Landsberg.
Thank you, Bruce. But that's right? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion with the safe system approach and enforcement. And there's this idea that enforcement, and I will say effective enforcement, because we're going to get into that, and prosecution. But there's this idea that enforcement is not or should not be part of the safe system approach, which we disagree with. And I'm wondering if someone from the Office of Highway Safety can comment on that. But also, I would be interested, does anyone know where Europe is on drug impaired driving? Because everybody is facing this issue, not just, you know, the United States. What are they doing on this?
Well, Chair, I don't have data on hand about how Europe's drug impaired driving problem. I think that Member Landsberg rightly pointed out that for many years, most European countries have had a very strict and low tolerance for alcohol use and driving. So their per se impairment limits range, as Member Landsberg noted, from 0.02 to 0.05. And they also can do in many countries, breath testing, compulsory breath testing. So something that might happen at just a checkpoint, which is certainly a great deterrent, and something that's not practiced in the United States. I think your point too about the safe systems approach and about designing roadways that are less likely to allow for speeding or to allow for out of control driving certainly must contribute to general success. But in terms of drugs other than alcohol, where I know there's been a great success story in many European countries, I am not aware of their track record on other drugs, except to say that I think that drugs are proliferating across the globe and an emerging problem, I think, in most countries.
Yeah, I'd like to, although alcohol is certainly more of an issue, I would like to stay on the issue of drug impaired driving. Dr. Malloy, do you want to add? And thank you. Is it Dr. Price? Dr. Yeah, I just making sure. Dr. Price, thank you for that. I thought that was excellent. Thank you for that addition.
One, I wanted to say with enforcement fitting into the safe systems approach,
Yes.
Certainly under safe users, no one's taken away the idea that we need to drive safely, and that fits well into safe users. And so enforcement is an integral part to the safe systems approach. And
hold on that one. It's okay. Not just a integral part. Other countries that were the visionaries for Vision Zero, and I forget the Australian counterpart to that right now, but all those programs have within it a much more strict enforcement of laws. That's right. Even when we talked to the Netherlands in one of our webinars, that was a key part of it. You have to have a disincentive and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's a key part of the safe system approach.
Certainly.
Anyways, Dr. Malloy, on the other, I think you were going to comment on the other. I think on the
drug driving approach too is, again, as you talk about the Vision Zero and kind of the zero tolerance, that they generally are more strict with regard to license removals when you have these types of offenses. So I think, again, the enforcement when you violate those laws are different than they're here.
Much stronger.
Yes.
Much stronger. Thank you. So I don't think there are other questions, although please pop up if any other member has a question for this round. If not, I'm going to go the second round, and just so we are aware, we're going to take a break between the second and third round, as some of the folks on here have been on for quite a while. So we'll give them a little break for the third round, but we'll now turn to the second safety issue, which is technology to prevent speeding. And we'll start with Member Landsberg.
So I think one of the biggest challenges is that speeders are going to speed. And we could talk about some of the other egregiously bad driving behaviors. You mentioned ISA and the importance of that. Can you give us any reason as to why ISA seems to be popular in Europe and yet not so much here in the United States?
One aspect that we identified in talking to some colleagues in Europe was that, just as the chair was mentioning earlier, enforcement is quite a bit different over there. They actually have a lot more automated speed enforcement or speed safety cameras than we have here. So ISA is generally viewed more as a helpful driver assistance system that can help drivers avoid speeding tickets. Whereas, again, that's not the case here in the US.
So one area that I know NTSB has spent a lot of time discussing is the use of speed safety cameras. And that's been litigated on both sides of the fence. Some states allow it, some states prohibit it. I note that California has had a bad enough problem in certain parts of the state that they have actually implemented in certain jurisdictions. Do you have a sense for how effective the speed safety cameras are in deterring repeat offenders?
As a general countermeasure for speeding, they're highly effective. They're noted on NHTSA's proven countermeasures for speeding. In terms of deterring repeat offenders, there's less known about how any of these countermeasures work because it has been less studied.
Do we have a sense that in the enforcement side of things, because they don't identify an individual, they identify a vehicle, and one of the objections is, well, you know, I'm getting fined for something, I lent my car to somebody. And I would say after multiple incidents of the guy lending his car to the wrong person, you start to say, wait a minute, this you need to be a little more careful about who you lend your car to, and by the way, have them pay up. But do the states have any ability to follow up on some of these people, and do they escalate the fines significantly as a financial disincentive?
I actually do not have information on the fine structure associated with automated enforcement.
And if I may, Member Landsberg, I live in Montgomery County, where we have a lot of speed cameras that do the violations to the cars. And that's one of the studies used by NHTSA to show the effectiveness is how well that reduced crash rates in Montgomery County. So I think even in those general senses, they're effective at reducing crash rates.
Very good. Thank you. No further questions at this point. If I think of something else, I'll raise my hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Landsberg. Sorry, you already spoke. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always very interested in technology that can help out with driver behavior. Can you tell me how intelligent speed assistance works? In other words, how does it know what the speed limit is on a road?
So generally speaking, there are two main ways that the system would determine the speed limit. They could use an online or a mapping database of posted speed limits, or use onboard cameras to recognize speed signs. And many systems use a combination of those two approaches.
Okay, and some will give you a passive warning and others will give you an active warning and slow you down. Is that correct?
That's correct. So passive systems will just issue a warning to the driver, and active systems can span a range of actions. So for example, increased resistance on the pedal will physically make it more difficult to speed, but the driver can still overcome that. Up to the total speed speeding elimination, which would be above the speed limit, no further power would go to the engine and the vehicle could not exceed the limit.
Okay, thank you for that. And you did mention during the presentation that there are challenges of this system, or should I say, what are the limitations of ISA?
So we know there's still some technical type challenges. For example, in the US, many of the highway speed signs are not uniform. So it is somewhat challenging for some of these systems to recognize all those signs. But these are things that can be overcome. And again, in the presentation, we mentioned public acceptance, and that's generally believed to be a fairly significant barrier to adoption of the technology, because there's sort of a feeling that customers don't want this system on their vehicle.
Very good. Thank you for that. That's all the questions I have in this section. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Graham. Member Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Today, we're considering a proposed recommendation to NHTSA, which, if it's adopted, and I think we anticipate it will be, it will call on NHTSA to require all new vehicles to be equipped with intelligent speed assistance systems that, At a minimum, warn the driver when the vehicle exceeds the speed limit. I strongly support this. I was an advocate, and I want to thank our team for working with me on the issue in advance. The U.S. is lagging behind Europe, which made intelligent speed assistance mandatory for all new models of vehicles introduced in the European Union beginning in July 2022. And since 2009, the European New Car Assessment Program has promoted the installation of speed assistance systems that help drivers to control their speed. In contrast, NHTSA is merely considering whether intelligent speed assistance merits inclusion in the 10-year NCAP roadmap to conduct research and develop test procedures. Again, my thanks to our team. I think this is an important recommendation, and I want to thank my fellow board members for what I anticipate will be their likely support. We are also likely to reiterate an existing recommendation which asks that NHTSA incentivize adoption of intelligent speed assistance by including the technology in the New Car Assessment Program, or NCAP. Now, we have actually reiterated this, I believe, twice previously. I think this will be the third time. Why might this recommendation continue to be helpful if we are also recommending that intelligent speed assistance should be required as standard equipment?
Thank you for that question. So in a perfect world, federal motor vehicle safety standards and the US NCAP can be a complementary approach. So a safety standard would set a minimum level of safety that's required on all vehicles, whereas the NCAP rating system would promote higher levels of safety through its rating program. So that approach can be used here with ISA as well.
And what is the fundamental difference between US NCAP and other NCAPs, especially Euro NCAP? Why is it we seem to lag behind?
Well, my understanding is that Euro NCAP has been frequently updated throughout the years, whereas US NCAP has not been updated very frequently. So in other words, Euro NCAP is better able to adopt new technologies and new test procedures and new approaches more quickly.
And is that partly because US NCAP is actually a governmental, essentially regulatory system, whereas Euro NCAP is not? Euro NCAP, I believe, is, if not privately, at least it's not regulatory in nature.
That could certainly contribute.
And what role do we envision for auto manufacturers in helping to accelerate voluntary adoption of intelligent speed assistance? I think there are some 20 manufacturers now that do offer at least some form of ISA on at least higher end models.
Yes, that's right. In looking at this report, we identified a number of manufacturers that already offer some of these systems. As you mentioned, many are only on certain models, or buyers have to purchase them as specific option packages. So automakers can really serve a great role here in getting the vehicle onto more widespread onto more vehicles. And that's why we've proposed the recommendation to the manufacturers to put it on standard on all vehicles. We've seen this approach work very well with other crash avoidance technologies. For example, automatic emergency braking, which still does not have a federal safety standard, but is on almost all vehicles.
And that's again where reiterating our recommendation with regard to including this in NCAP could provide further support to ensure that we get this out there on more of a voluntary basis, at least in anticipation of a potential federal standard, federal requirement down the road.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The difference between passive and active technologies. So my vehicle reads the stop sign, pops up right next to where my speed indicator is, and it'll pop up what the speed limit is in that area, so I can clearly see. I think it is very effective for safety. But do both passive and active technologies provide safety benefits?
The research that we looked at in developing the report did consistently find that both types of systems can offer benefits, yes.
Great. And how long ago did we first issue recommendations to NHTSA on speeding technology?
In 2012, we had recommendations regarding commercial vehicles and advanced speed limiting technology. In 2017 was the first recommendation for passenger vehicles, excuse me.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Ms. Perot to come back up here. Can you, first of all, the original recommendation from 2012, can you talk about that report? Or just the circumstances of the crash, maybe?
Yeah, so it's from our Miami, Oklahoma report, and it was basically a truck, tractor, trailer combination vehicle that came up to a row of stop traffic, and it didn't stop and ran through the stop traffic.
And what has NHTSA done on any of our recommendation regarding speeding technology to date?
They've reviewed it, they've looked at it, and haven't done much more. Request for comments, as it was stated earlier, and that's about it. There's no rulemaking yet.
No rulemaking. Yet we have a public health crisis that is known and repeated by everybody who gives a speech from NHTSA or DOT on road safety, but they're not doing anything. Again, how many more people have to die before action is taken? Along those lines, what is Nevada doing on speeding? And
they have a number of actions that sort of cover your more traditional countermeasures for speeding. They have they have plans in place to make sure that new roadway projects are designed with speed limiting designs like roundabouts, median islands, that sort of thing. They have a sort of strategization technique where they look at existing roadways to see high crash locations and what engineering improvements could be made there. They have a number of outreach programs promoting driver behavior as well as enforcement of appropriate speed limits. And they use high visibility enforcement for things like aggressive driving and reckless driving.
A lot of states really focus on high crash locations, but I think what you miss there is when you're not looking at low crash, high severity locations, then you're missing something. Do we have any evidence that Nevada looks at that as well?
We don't know exactly how they make their determination, no.
Okay, and so for this one, though, we found that infrastructure changes probably wouldn't be made based on the past history here by the state. I will note that, again, I read through the highway safety plan for 2021 for the state. I read through the 2021 through 2025 strategic highway safety plan, which notes that they're mainly focused on infrastructure, high visibility enforcement, and education and outreach, and then speed management action plan, which they issued in June 2022. Could Nevada begin the or join the conversation with states and localities on technology and implement technology on their own vehicles, their own fleets for speed assistance?
Certainly states are able to do that, and Nevada could do that if they desired.
Do we know any cities or states that are doing it now?
So we know about the New York City pilot program that was mentioned in the presentation. And we're also aware that in New York, there have been bills recently introduced that would look at the issue more from the repeat offender angle, installing ISA systems on individuals who've had multiple speeding tickets.
Okay, I have more questions, but first I see I'm running out of time here. So I want to ask if Member Landsberg has additional questions in this area.
No further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Member Graham or Member Chapman?
No more questions for Member Graham. Thank you.
Chair, I want to just offer one observation, but I will hold until after you finish your questioning.
Okay, I will say, going back to Member Landsberg, I did like his conversation about speed cameras. For safety cameras, they do have an impact on slowing speeds in areas, especially in areas where there are clearly speeding issues. One question I have, okay, let me actually throw this out for Dr. Malloy or Dr. Poland. What are the principles of the safe system approach?
So the principles of the safe system approach are basically humans are vulnerable. They that humans make mistakes, that it's a shared responsibility among all of us. No death or serious injury is acceptable, and that we're proactive with our safety.
Great, thank you for that. And it's the shared responsibility I particularly want to talk about outside of Nevada, which definitely has a responsibility, outside of NHTSA, which very clearly has a responsibility. I want to talk about the auto manufacturers for a second. Do you believe that the way vehicles are marketed can impact safety or how they're used?
Certainly. I think, I've been at the board now for 25 years, over 25 years. Certainly was an issue with seatbelts. They were marketed with people not wearing seatbelts ever, and we felt that needed to change. With regard to speeding, I've seen a study in 2010 that reviewed customers, subjects' feelings about ads they looked at. And they definitely noted the increased power that it was communicating that this vehicle would corner better than other vehicles. And those were characteristics of the ads that they felt were potentially leading people to be more risky on the roads.
Yeah, in fact, there is some research also showing that certain driver characteristics mixed with high performance vehicles and perceptions of impact, possibly perceptions of whether they'll get caught by police or whether they'll end up in a tragedy, all can impact the use or misuse of these high performance vehicles. I'd like to ask staff to pull up a video.
The Brotherhood of Muscle has always been known for flexing its power. But when we announced last call, some people got nervous. They thought we were gonna slow down, pack it in, ride off into the sunset. Think again.
Thank you very much for showing that. And what I want to point out there, aside from this fact that they're clearly going for speeding at the end, the words never lift. I really want to call attention that for a second, because that is something that Dodge promotes and in selling its vehicles. I will also say that this one was last call for the Challenger, which is no longer sold by Dodge after 2023. But what I will point out is they have had Speed Week annually at different auto shows. They have repeatedly stated never lift as their mantra, which is don't lift your foot off the pedal, and a host of other things that I will mention in when we get towards amendments. But I do think that those ads have a significant influence on how people view those vehicles, or certain drivers at least. In this case, this was a 305 horsepower vehicle. The industry sort of defines serious high power vehicle as anything over 300 horsepower. Then you've got the supercars, which are over 500 horsepower. So I certainly understand how much of a concern it is. And I'll get back to this later in the conversation. I might want to bring that video up one more time when we get to the later conversation. But thank you very much. It is something I think that needs to be reviewed. Member Chapman?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick observation. I know that one of the obstacles potentially to adoption of intelligent speed assistance systems in the U.S. is public acceptance. And I know that there is a cultural difference, at least in terms of the driving culture, between what we see in Europe, what we see in the U.S. Still, the draft report cites a survey that found that 56% of U.S. respondents indicated support for ISA. Again, that's 56%. Now, I know you can look at this as the glass half empty or the glass half full, but I find that to be a surprisingly high percentage, considering that there's been relatively little effort made to promote ISA or to build public awareness of the technology here in the United States. In addition, Appendix C of our draft report lists 20 manufacturers, this was mentioned earlier, 20 manufacturers which currently offer optional ISA capabilities for the U.S. passenger vehicle market. That means that the auto manufacturers think that there's at least some market for it out there. So not sure what this means exactly, but I know that acceptance is a potential challenge for us. I think there are at least some signs that maybe there's more acceptance out there, or potential acceptance than we might anticipate. So I'm encouraged by that, and I just wanted to offer that as an observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Just checking one more time. Okay, great. I would think for speeding technology, as the mom of a teenager who today is getting her learner's permit, I would be right in line for ISA technology to make sure that she was safe. So for getting more public acceptance, I think a good place to start is parents. All right. So we are going to move on to safety issue number 3. But first, so safety issue number 3 is countermeasures targeted at repeat speeding offenders. But before we go into safety issue number 3, we're going to take a little break. Some folks have been on here for quite a while, and I want to give them a little break before we go into the third session. So we'll reconvene at 11:20. Right? Everybody make sure you have your cameras off. Thank you. All right, we are going to begin our discussion on safety issue 3 of 3, and that's on countermeasures targeted at repeat speeding offenders. I just want to make sure everyone's back here. All right, great. So we'll start with Member Landsberg.
Thank you, Chair. So first, it seems like we might start with effective enforcement. And as I mentioned earlier, I think speed safety cameras are far more effective than police officers in this area. The police have enough to do without worrying about this. And I offer, just as a point of reference, last weekend, I took a 600-mile road trip to attend a wedding on the interstates. There was not one single traffic stop that I observed in the couple of days that it took to do this. There were, however, a couple of crashes. And I can assure you that there was some egregiously bad behavior. And one of the things about the safety cameras is it eliminates the risk for both officers and violators. It's unbiased. It eliminates pretextual stops. So how about some effective enforcement after someone is identified as a repeat offender? We've seen here that our justice system is not up to the task, and I think we'll probably discuss that a little bit more. My question is why?
Do you mind repeating the question, sir?
Our justice system doesn't seem to be up to the task of managing this. We had an entire list of this driver being not just a bad actor, but an egregiously bad actor in multiple areas in terms of substance abuse and inability to follow any traffic laws. And yet, the justice system was unable to preclude this person from driving. And my question is why?
I think, Member Landsberg, you're getting to the point that staff is concerned about, is that data about this driver was not getting passed among organizations. And we think that states need to do a better job in the identification of these repeat offenders. So we've made a recommendation to the states and NHTSA to improve that. And I think without good data, you don't necessarily have good outcomes. So,
yeah, we've seen this in multiple crashes where we have bad offenders who continually have a problem. Now, doesn't NHTSA have a national driver's register?
Yes, they do. It's known as the problem driver pointer system.
Is it being universally used by the states?
Yes, all 50 states are required to participate in this program.
So how come it didn't work in this case or in numerous other cases?
Well, and what that system is designed to do is address suspended drivers. So if somebody goes in and gets and applies for a new driver's license in some state or renews their driver's license, that system is checked. It's not necessarily an overall encompassing database. It is supposed to include serious traffic offenses, but that is not defined. So different states may define serious traffic offenses differently.
What part of 20 miles an hour or exceeding 100 miles an hour over the limit falls into an undefined serious offense or driving while suspended? And that's a rhetorical question. I mean, but it seems to me that there's a really good opportunity here to start to crack down on these bad actors. Chair, I'll stop here, and I may have another question in just a little bit.
Thank you. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. When the NTSB investigators pulled the driver's 10-year driving record from the state of Nevada, how many speeding citations were listed?
One.
Can you please pull up slide 41 from the presentation? As staff discussed, since April 2017, about 5 years prior to the crash, the driver was cited for speeding 7 times in Nevada. Can you please discuss the challenges investigators faced in order to identify those 7 speeding citations, since only one appeared on the driver's 10-year driving record?
Yes, I can address that. So obviously we queried the national law enforcement systems to find out what they could let us, what they could give us, the information they could give us. And it wasn't much more than what the official driver's history, the 10-year history gave us. So we had to go into multiple different local court jurisdictions within the Clark County area and query each one of those courts to find out whether or not he had had any sort of adjudication in those court systems. So we did find records in the City of North Las Vegas Municipal Court, the Clark County Justice Court, and the Las Vegas Municipal Court, but we did query several others as well.
Thank you. In the 17 months prior to the crash, how many times was a driver cited for speeding in Nevada?
5.
5 times. In fact, the driver was cited for speeding for the 5th time in the past 17 months, less than 2 months before he killed a family of 7 at over 100 miles per hour. Of those 5 speeding citations, how many appeared on the driver's 10-year driving record?
0.
0. Of those 5 speeding citations, how many were reduced to illegal parking?
3.
3. If a speeding citation is reduced to illegal parking, does that speeding citation appear on the driver's record in Nevada?
No, it does not.
If the speeding citation, well, I already said that. The 3 times this driver was cited by police for speeding in the 17 months before killing the family of 7. 3 times this driver walked out of Nevada court with a clean driving record and nothing more than a parking ticket. Generally, can you discuss the importance of identifying repeat speeding offenders for traffic safety?
Well, obviously, if all of the information is known by everybody that's involved in the adjudication process, be that the judges and the prosecutors, then they are better positioned to make decisions on these plea bargains. And without that information, then plea bargains may continue to occur. So I think that's why we're advocating for a recommendation to develop systems to some countermeasures to educate the people on the importance of complete digital systems as far as all the information, whether that be convictions, citations, or plea bargains.
Thank you for that. The practice of regularly reducing speeding tickets to parking tickets in Nevada was not specific to this driver. An investigation piece from the Las Vegas Review-Journal published in July of 2022 found that the city courts in Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and Henderson reduced more than 200,000 moving violations to parking tickets between 2017 and 2021. In Las Vegas Municipal Court, more than 95,000 speeding tickets were filed, but more than 80% were reduced to illegal parking. I see my time's about up. I will come back to this in the next round. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Is there data from NHTSA or from other sources which sheds light on the prevalence or the connection between repeat speeding offenders and DWI offenses?
So NHTSA does capture some high-level data in terms of the likelihood of people with prior records in the past 5 years to have repeat speeding or repeat DUI offenses. The data is fairly high level.
So we have limited data, but what data we do have indicates a fairly clear connection between repeat speeding and DWI. Correct?
So there are definitely links between impairment and speeding, yes.
Okay. And is there evidence indicating that repeat speeding offenders have a higher risk of fatal crash involvement?
There have been a number of studies from, again, NHTSA and other researchers that have looked at that issue and consistently found that repeat speeding offenders do have higher risks of causing fatal crashes.
And is there a centralized source of data for tracking repeat speeding or repeat DWI offenders?
My understanding is that this is primarily done at the state level rather than a centralized system.
So it's going to vary among the states, but certainly that's one of the challenges, and we see it here in Nevada. One of the challenges is finding the information in the first place in order to identify a repeat offender, whether it's speeding or DWI or some other serious activity. Well, I think I know how you'll answer this question, but would a centralized database of repeat offenders be helpful? And I guess maybe just as important, is it feasible?
My understanding is that, yes, that would be helpful. It would be, I think, a difficult problem, but it would be something that would be of use.
And I think the answer to this question is obvious. Is a lack of data a significant challenge for state and local authorities seeking to address repeat offenders? Well, we see it in this case here, where had this driver been identified as a repeat offender, it seems there's a much greater likelihood that his behavior would have been addressed, and perhaps this tragedy could have been avoided. That's all I have on this, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Member Graham. Get ready, because in a second I'm going to yield you my time, because I think this is a serious issue. I mean, just reading from the Las Vegas Review-Journal from July 2022, which about investigating these speeding tickets that were reduced to parking violations. They say deals were given to more than 400 people cited for driving more than 30 miles per hour over, as well as about 80 people accused of going more than 40 miles per hour over the speed limit. Most weren't even required to attend traffic safety school, and that tickets often carry little punishment once they're downgraded to parking. I do think this is a big problem. And in fact, it also notes here that Nevada rarely suspends licenses for repeatedly breaking the law. The state issued fewer than 800 points related license suspensions between 2017 and 2021, record shows. That's about 3 suspensions for every 10,000 licenses. So, Member Graham, I'm going to yield you the rest of my time for this round.
Well, thank you, Chair. One more question for you all. How may reducing speeding citations to illegal parking impact a state's ability to identify repeat speeding offenders?
Well, obviously, that's one of the issues that why we're advocating for what we're advocating for regarding the databases that show all these reductions, these plea bargains that everybody has access to. Because, you know, if everybody doesn't know what has already been done for a particular driver as far as plea agreements are concerned, it's impossible for them to hold anybody responsible for their own actions.
Enforcement of speed limits is a long-standing countermeasure to reducing speeding-related deaths. However, law enforcement agencies represent only one piece of our justice system. And the mere enforcement and ticketing of drivers who violate the speed limit will not by itself make our communities safer from repeat speeding offenders. Adequate and just prosecution of repeat speeding offenders is necessary to ensure enforcement of speeding laws produce a safety benefit. Here, the state of Nevada routinely reduced speeding tickets to parking violations and allowed the driver to continue recklessly violating speeding laws and remain free from adequate and just prosecution despite enforcement. Chair, I don't know if anybody has any more. I can come back. I have some more questions, but I'm not sure the others are up.
Okay, reclaiming my small bit of time, 2 minutes. Is this an issue in other states?
Yes, it's a common thing with many states. In our investigation, we spoke to several other states that said that they do not have a central database for plea bargains and these types of things. And they do reduce speeding violations to other, whether that might be moving the speeds down just a little bit from what was actually cited, or completely down to a non-moving violation, which would not affect somebody's driver's license. And we do in the report cite a National Academy study that they did a more comprehensive survey of all the states, and they found that this is a very common practice.
Yeah, and I'll note that they noted that on the part on Nevada too in their study, which I read yesterday. But how about the database issue? Is that an issue in other states? A centralized database on citations?
I can't speak towards all states, obviously. There may be some states that do track plea agreements and speed reductions and things like this. However, the states that we spoke to directly, that is not something that they have in place, because there's so many jurisdictions within each state.
Yeah, I mean, I would just note information on traffic cases has been stored in a central online repository since the late 2000s in Utah and 2008 in Idaho. But there does not appear to be a statewide case management system or central online repository for California. And 13 of Arizona's 15 counties use the same case management system, but the 2 largest counties don't participate in that. So clearly this is beyond just a Nevada problem. With that in mind, I'm going to turn to Member Landsberg as I see somebody holding up the fingers to me that I'm done.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess the first question is, how long have databases been around, and how long have we been working with these kinds of things? It's a rhetorical question, but I would think that we would be able to resolve that. The question, databases have been with us for decades, and it just seems like we are constantly playing catch up on something that, with certain notable exceptions, people agree is something that we need. So maybe you can help us. What judicial guidance for plea bargains exist to protect the public, say, for example, in the state of Nevada? So it seems to be that, if you get tagged with speeding and the court doesn't feel like they want to do anything with you, you're taken off the hook. Is there any guidance whatsoever to judges about how this is supposed to be handled?
I'm not sure about guidance to judges. However, the Clark County District Attorney's Office does have a matrix that they use to basically conduct plea bargains and speeding offenses. And in that matrix, it does show that even if you're cited for a pretty serious speeding violation, they will, which would be the equivalent of 6 demerit points, they will be willing to plea bargain that down to a parking violation.
That is absurd. I suspect that the insurance community probably has better data on all of this, and the insurance disincentives are costing us all an awful lot of money. The other thing that I would point out, and I think this may be an elephant in the room, is the legal industry is making a ton of money off of these kind of cases. And in many cases, the state legislatures are populated by defense attorneys. And I realize that may be a little beyond our purview, but I think until we start to address and make the public aware of how bad this situation is, and that's not just for speeding, it's for DUI and it's for distracted driving, things are not going to get appreciably better. Any comments, Dr. Malloy? You're muted.
So we certainly agree that in this case, there were many missed opportunities to identify this driver as a repeat offender and get him off the road before this type of tragedy happened. I think the building blocks start with making sure the states have developed a way to identify them. You know, I think when you look at the Clark County plea bargain document they have, it talks about multiple speeding offenses and how that adjusts things. It doesn't move things up, but too much, but it does affect the plea bargaining agreements. So I think unless we get that data clearly to everyone, we're going to have a hard time improving things. So I think the states and NHTSA, I think, are in a really good position to try and figure out what tools they can use to improve this process.
I would just close with, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And I think we can all see pretty clearly that this problem, it doesn't have a single faceted solution, but there are some very clear solutions that could be done. No further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. As I discussed earlier, there was only one speeding citation listed on the driver's 10-year record. How many court databases did the NTSB investigators search to build the driver's history of speeding violations prior to the crash?
I believe we searched, I don't have an exact number, but we searched the majority of the databases within the Clark County area, the Las Vegas area, probably 8 different databases. And we, as I stated before, we found records in 3 of them.
Wow. Up to maybe 8 different databases. Please discuss how a repeat speeding offender may be treated as a first-time offender without an improved statewide electronic system that tracks citations and adjudications, excuse me.
Well, for example, in this particular crash, this driver was able to go in, even though he had several other speeding tickets, he was able to go to court and get a plea agreement, regardless of those previous agreements and previous speeding citations, because according to the data that was available, he had not received any other citations. So in the court's eyes, he was basically a first offender, or I believe in one of the cases I saw that there was one documented previous offense, but that it didn't prevent the case from being plea bargained down.
Yeah. Specifically, the driver's December 9th, 2021 speeding citation. Are you aware how many moving violations did the driver incur in the previous 3 years?
Moving violations in 5.
5.
5.
Do you know how many he was found guilty of?
He was, well, I mean, if you count the plea bargains, then he was found guilty of 5 violations, but he was only found guilty of 2 speeding violations, and those 2 weren't reflected on his license due to the fact that he was on a payment plan and he hadn't completed the payment plan, and so therefore those violations hadn't been documented in his 10-year history just yet.
Yeah, and what I could tell, he only the court only noted 1 previous moving violation in the previous 3 years out of all of that. So I know you guys looked at North Las Vegas, Henderson, Las Vegas, unincorporated Clark County. They're all close to each other. They're adjacent in some cases. If you drive around the Las Vegas metropolitan area, drivers will inevitably drive across the jurisdictional lines. And if a driver is caught speeding, say in Henderson, North Las Vegas should know about it. The state of Nevada must do better about removing the silos among adjacent courts and share the information. I want to thank the team for that, for your answers. And Chair, that's all I have in this section. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Member Chapman.
Nothing more from me, Chair. Member Graham has done an excellent job of covering this area.
Thank you. And I will just add that the state's speed management plan, strategic highway safety plan, and the highway safety plan don't mention anything about addressing repeat offender issues with regards to speeding. I do note that we are going to consider a recommendation to the states on including in their highway safety plan elements, identifying repeat offenders and reducing speeding recidivism. I would like to, just to prepare everyone, I would like to understand what you mean by elements, what you're envisioning there, so you can think about that. In the meantime, if there are not any more questions on this section, I'm going to open it up for questioning on anything else, starting with Member Landsberg.
No further questions, Chair. I think we've pretty well covered it. Thank you.
Great. Member Graham.
I have no further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Member Chapman.
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, great. I have two questions. The state of Nevada has 18 open highway-related recommendations from the NTSB, including an unacceptable response regarding primary seatbelt laws. I want to encourage Nevada to focus on increasing safety by closing those recommendations acceptably. What recommendations do we know have been open the longest? Probably Ms. Perot could answer that question.
Yes, I can answer that question, Chair. It would be our recommendation from 1996 about child safety seats.
And has the state made any effort to close those recommendations?
All of the recommendations are there. We have been corresponding back and forth with the state and regularly, and we've also had some conversations with the state on various issues. Some, especially one of our older recommendations on graduated driver licensing. And we keep the communication lines open. So we recently closed the recommendation H2239, acceptable alternate. So that shows progress in that area. So we're just keeping the communication lines open and working with the state.
For those watching, can you remind what that is?
H2239 was a recommendation from our drug
impaired driving report.
Drug impaired driving study, and yeah, and it had a very long title. So it is a recommendation where we ask states to go through and look at their impaired driving elements and make changes and using the NTSB tool. We talked about that earlier during this meeting. So
great. I would once again encourage the state to address our recommendations so they can be closed acceptable. Finally, I want to ask Ms. Catania a question. What happens after we issue this final report? What sort of actions do we take to get our recommendations implemented?
Thank you, Chair. After the board meeting, the Office of Safety Recommendations and Communications will work with the NTSB staff, board members, and stakeholders, including safety advocates, industry organizations, vehicle manufacturers, state and local government officials, to amplify our recommendations and emphasize the dangers of speeding and drug-impaired driving. We will share information via targeted media outreach, digital and social media, and at national and state engagements. We will monitor state legislatures for any action on state recommendations and offer support through testimony and letters. We will track and evaluate recommendation responses, working with recipients to ensure they understand our recommendations and the actions required to further safety. And this includes working with these recipients to identify any alternative actions to address safety when they believe they cannot meet what we required from them.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We're going to do a 10-minute break, a short break, so everybody can reset before we go on to the findings, the recommendations, and the probable cause. So we'll be back at noon. Just a reminder for everyone to turn their cameras and microphones off. All right, we're now back in session. So I am going to ask Mr. Curtis if you'll please read the proposed findings.
Certainly, Chair. As a result of this investigation, staff proposes 13 findings. Number 1, none of the following were factors in this crash. 1, mechanical condition of the Dodge, 2, actions of other drivers, and 3, weather and visibility. Number 2, the emergency response was timely and adequate. Number 3, the Dodge driver's use of cocaine and phencyclidine impaired his decision-making such that he accelerated to excessive speed and failed to obey traffic controls, resulting in the multi-vehicle crash. Number 4, both the Dodge driver's history and his specific actions on the day of the crash showed repeated disregard for safety and traffic laws. Number 5, Nevada's efforts to address safety recommendation H-22-39 through the development and implementation of its impaired driving program plan are conducive to increased safety. Number 6, broad deployment of intelligent speed assistance would reduce the frequency of speeding and speeding-related crashes. Number 7, an active intelligent speed assistance system that electronically limits the speed of the vehicle may have mitigated the severity of the North Las Vegas crash. Number 8, improving public acceptance of intelligent speed assistance systems and wider voluntary deployment, such as by automakers, will facilitate the advancement of a new motor vehicle safety standard on intelligent speed assistance. Number 9, because the Dodge driver was a repeat speeding offender, he was more likely to cause a speeding-related fatal crash. Number 10, inaccurate driver records due to delays in reporting convictions and plea agreements that alter or drop violations, such as what occurred in this case in the state of Nevada, reduce the likelihood that repeat speeding offenders can be accurately identified. Number 11, electronic citation data tracking systems can help identify and track high-risk drivers, including repeat speeding offenders. However, the lack of guidance may result in inconsistencies among the states. Number 12, repeat speeding is a nationwide problem, but evidence-based countermeasures targeting repeat speeding offenders and high-risk drivers are lacking. And number 13, intelligent speed assistance systems have the potential to reduce speeding among repeat speeding offenders. Chair?
Thanks very much. We're going to do a little roll call if members Landsberg, Graham, and Chapman can all pop up on the screen. Thanks very much. Are there any amendments to the findings? Nope. Any sort of discussion on the findings? Any questions before we go to a vote on the findings? All right. Do we have a motion to adopt the findings as proposed? Member Landsberg. Member Landsberg offered the motion and Member Graham seconded. Council, will you call the roll?
Yes, board, as I call your names, and if in favor, say aye. If opposed, say nay. Member Landsberg.
Aye.
Member Graham.
Aye.
Member Chapman.
Aye.
And Chair Homendy.
Aye.
Chair, the vote tally is 4 in favor of adopting the findings as presented.
Great. So we've adopted the findings. We are now going to move to the proposed probable cause. Mr. Curtis, can you read that?
Staff proposes the following probable cause. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of the North Las Vegas, Nevada crash was the Dodge driver's excessive speed and failure to obey traffic control devices. Contributing to the driver's behavior was his impairment from the effects of cocaine and phencyclidine and his disregard for safety and traffic laws. Chair?
Thank you very much. Are there any amendments to the proposed probable cause?
I have an amendment, Chair.
Great. Member Graham, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I move to amend the probable cause to add to the end of the proposed probable cause an additional statement, and I quote, also contributing to the driver's repeated disregard for safety and traffic laws, despite numerous citations, was the state of Nevada's failure to deter the driver's speeding recidivism due to systemic deficiencies, including routine plea agreements that alter or drop violations, inaccurate driver records, failure to accurately track citations, and delays in reporting convictions, end quote.
Thank you, Member Graham. I'm going to second the amendment and going back to you, Member Graham, to start the discussion.
Thank you, Chair. The board has historically considered all potential causal factors prior to determining the probable cause of an accident or a crash. Here, the proposed probable cause falls short of the board's historical due diligence by inexplicably failing to consider material factors as causal. It is unreasonable to review Nevada's authorized practice of pleading down repeat speeding tickets to parking violations in siloed courts and conclude that those facts to be immaterial to an investigation into a driver who killed a family of 7 while speeding after incurring 5 speeding violations in the previous 17 months. The proposed probable cause includes only the driver's actions, but ignores the systemic deficiencies that allowed a driver with a history of speeding tickets to continue operating a motor vehicle unimpeded and with impunity. The state of Nevada failed to hold the driver accountable. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there other discussion on the amendment? Anyone, any other members that want to speak?
Chair, just want to indicate that I support the amendment.
I would also support the amendment.
Thank you both. I will just add one more time. The safe system approach, everyone shares responsibility, and that includes the state. So I agree with the amendment, and I'm going to go ahead and ask that council call the roll on the amendment. Wait, actually, apparently I'm supposed to ask staff if you have a position.
Sorry, Chair, can you repeat that?
Yeah, does staff have a position?
Staff certainly supports the amended probable cause. One suggestion, if I may, for us, the systematic deficiencies are covered in the routine plea agreements that alter and etc. So just the same proposal due to routine plea agreements that alter or drop violations, etc. I think we didn't do a systematic study. We found some research that indicated that, and we saw plea agreements in this case and others that were concerning to us. So just going straight to that instead of the systematic deficiencies. Otherwise, we support it.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
I disagree. I think we did show systemic deficiencies here with all the data, not just what we found outside the report. I think we talked about it quite a bit within the report and covered that. Yes, do I think we could have gone farther with the investigation down some of these paths with the state of Nevada? Yes, but I think we have more than enough here to justify this amendment.
Chair, if I could add on the systemic deficiencies, I think from my perspective, from a legal standpoint, Dr. Malloy is concerned with the systemic deficiencies from a standpoint of this is about an individual's record involving plea agreements made for this particular individual. And I don't know that the investigation went into an analysis or deep analysis of each resolution of each citation that this individual had. So if you were to eliminate the systemic deficiencies language, that would probably eliminate that concern. Just a suggestion.
Yeah. Just speaking on this, I think it's pretty clear there were systemic deficiencies here. But Member Landsberg.
I would agree with your point, Chair, and the excerpt that you read from the newspaper, I think makes it pretty clear that there is a systemic problem here. And as you mentioned, if we believe in a systemic approach, safe systems approach, this needs to be addressed across the board. So I would support the amendment.
And likewise, Chair, and I recognize we probably could have investigated this further, but I do think I agree with Member Graham that there is sufficient evidence to indicate systemic deficiencies.
Okay, great. With that, we're going to go ahead and go to a vote. So, Tom, why don't you go ahead and call the roll?
Okay, just to confirm, we had an amendment offered and that was seconded, correct?
Correct. Member Graham offered the amendment. I seconded it.
Great. Okay. Board, if in favor, say aye. If opposed, say nay. Member Landsberg?
Aye.
Member Graham?
Aye.
Member Chapman?
Aye.
And Chair Homendy?
Aye.
Chair, the vote tally is 4 in favor of adopting the probable cause as amended by Member Graham.
All right, then I'm going to go ahead and offer a motion to adopt the probable cause as amended if needed. Do we need another vote on that? I assume we do. So I will offer that as amended for a final vote to adopt the probable cause as amended. Go ahead, Tom.
All right. Board, then again, if in favor, say aye, and opposed, say nay. Member Landsberg?
Aye.
Member Graham?
Aye.
Member Chapman?
Aye.
Chair Homendy?
Aye. Great. Now we'll go ahead. No other amendments to the probable cause, correct? All right.
Chair,
we're going to.
Chair, just seeking clarification. Our first vote was on the amendment. This most recent vote was on the probable cause as amended, correct?
That's
As
correct.
amended.
All right. So we're going to now go ahead and move forward with the recommendations as proposed. Please, Mr. Curtis, if you can read those.
Certainly, Chair. As a result of this investigation, staff proposes the following 7 new safety recommendations. 5 to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Number 1, require as standard equipment in all new vehicles intelligent speed assistance systems that, at a minimum, warn the driver when the vehicle exceeds the speed limit. Number 2, develop a communication plan to educate the public about the capabilities and benefits of intelligent speed assistance to mitigate speeding. Number 3, update the uniform guidelines for state highway safety programs to include identification and tracking of repeat speeding offenders. Number 4, develop countermeasures to reduce speeding recidivism, determine their effectiveness, and then disseminate the results. Number 5, conduct research and develop guidelines to assist states in implementing pilot intelligent speed assistance interlock programs, limiting the vehicle speed for repeat speeding offenders. One recommendation to the 50 states, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia. Number 6, include in your highway safety plan elements to identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism. And one recommendation to the BMW Group, Ferrari USA, Ford Motor Company, General Motors Company, American Honda Motor Company, Hyundai USA, Kia Motors Corporation, Mazda USA, Mercedes-Benz USA, Mitsubishi Motors, Nissan USA, Porsche Cars North America, Stellantis, Subaru of America, Toyota Motor North America, Volkswagen Group, and Volvo Car Corporation. Number 7, install as standard equipment on all new vehicles intelligent speed assistance Start again. Install as standard equipment in all new vehicles intelligent speed assistance systems that, at a minimum, warn the driver when the vehicle exceeds the speed limit. Staff also proposes reiterating one previously issued safety recommendation in the report to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, recommendation H-17-24, which reads, incentivize passenger vehicle manufacturers and consumers to adopt intelligent speed adaptation ISA systems by, for example, including ISA in the new car assistance program. Chair?
Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis. I have an amendment to the recommendations, but first I would like to ask if other members have amendments or an amendment to the recommendations. All right, I'm going to recognize myself. This was something I circulated. There was a last minute change. So my proposal is to insert a new recommendation, number 8, to the National Academy of Sciences to evaluate the safety outcomes of marketing by automobile manufacturers that emphasizes vehicle performance capabilities and risky driving behaviors, including speeding. The evaluation should at a minimum compare vehicles based on engine size, power, and performance, and international approaches to such marketing. And then we would publish a publicly available report to that. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Discussion on the amendment, and I will start again highlighting that everyone shares in the responsibility for safety under a safe system approach. We know that speeding kills, but we see companies making vehicles with more and more horsepower. Dodge emphasizes speed and encourages drivers to never lift their foot off the gas pedal. They hold events named Speed Week. The last event in 2022 was called Last Call, powered by Roadkill Nights. That's what Dodge called it. This sort of advertising is dangerous. It contributes to a culture of speeding, and that culture can cost people lives as it did in this crash. We have seen crashes like this time and time again. Nearly 1/3 of deaths on our roadways are speeding related. The car in this crash wasn't a supercar, which is typically over 500 horsepower. However, the industry views anything over 300 horsepower as serious high performance vehicles. This vehicle clearly was able to speed and increase speed going into the intersection pretty quickly. So I had an advertisement that I showed earlier. I won't show it again. I will just mention another ad by Dodge recently was what they called Scream at 215. It's not responsible. It encourages bad behavior. I will mention that the auto industry spent $34.5 billion in advertising. That's a 2018 number, so I'm sure it's more now. A quote from a Canadian traffic safety expert in his book, No Accident. We know with little uncertainty that exposure to many types of risk-glorifying media, including television advertising and video gaming, increases risk-taking driving behaviors. I'll note that the UK banned such car ads by Ford, Chrysler, and Nissan. They banned them from promoting dangerous driving. Australia also banned the car ads, any car ads with reckless driving, drunk driving, speeding, or off-road driving, all would be in violation of their law. Ours apparently just full out allows it and then glorifies speeding around city streets in many of the ads. Consumer Reports had conducted a review of car ads. Performance-related attributes, speed and horsepower were mentioned 3 times more than safety or fuel economy green features, even though fuel economy and safety matters to a majority of car buyers. In 2010, a number of car ads depicting power, speed, and acceleration were tested on child subjects in a research study, which found they did, in fact, promote acceptance of dangerous driving behavior. I think my amendment would update research, hopefully, and then hopefully we can get more information, especially as more and more vehicles. There's one by Dodge now that's over 1,000 horsepower. So I am hoping that you will all consider my amendment. Member Graham.
Thank you for that, Chair. I'm just a little concerned the way it's written right now, but what I'm hearing from you is the concern about excess speed here. Loud and clear. I think the amendment is a little open-ended with performance capabilities and risky driving behaviors, and it opens that up a little bit. Would you be open to a friendly amendment to this?
It depends what it is. I think risky driving behaviors are pretty well defined as speeding, impaired driving. There are a number of risky driving behaviors, and performance capabilities are arranged for the vehicles. I would not want to just limit it to speeding.
Okay, because my friendly amendment would be this, and I'll read it to you here. Evaluate the safety outcomes of marketing by automobile manufacturers that emphasize excess speeding. The evaluation should compare vehicles based on engine size, power, and performance, and international approaches to such marketing. Publish a publicly available report.
Yeah, I mean, I would not want to limit it just to speeding.
I would, okay.
There are a host, like I said, car ads that emphasize safety issues, everything from reckless driving, drunk driving, aggressive driving, and speeding are all banned in certain countries. Member Landsberg.
I would like to also add distracted driving is a huge problem, and a lot of the car makers are now touting the size of their onboard screens, which are frequently used inappropriately. So that's another area that I think should not be forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point. I mean, some car manufacturers have marketed Apple CarPlay, which I understand, they are marketing as less distracting. It is not less distracting. You still have to take your eyes off the road to engage Apple CarPlay many times. So I agree with you, Member Landsberg. Member Graham.
I'm still a little concerned about this. I think it's a little open-ended, and I understand all the concerns of these. I have those too, but I don't think this report can effectively be used as a reference to back up that open-ended recommendation, but I'd be willing to support it on my friendly amendment.
I'm not going to limit it just to speeding. So I understand there are a host of risky driving behaviors which should be evaluated. This is really just a study. This is not recommending action other than a study to evaluate the safety impacts and outcomes of certain marketing related to risky driving behavior. Tom.
Chair, I'm comfortable with the amendment as written and would support it as written.
Thanks very much. Okay, staff, I think you might have a few things that you want to recommend here. You added at a minimum, which I tried to capture here, but.
Thank you for that. That was something we thought was important because there might be other aspects that we'd like them to capture. Staff supports the proposed recommendation as written. Staff would like to suggest a different recipient, possibly the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. They've done work in this area before. They've also done work with looking at performance cars and safety, noting that despite their seeming advantages in a crash, they have poor performance in certain cases. And I think they wouldn't need any funding. We're concerned a little bit that national academies would need funding. So,
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, having worked on the Hill and national academies asking us for appropriated funds to conduct a certain study that they were required to do in law. I know that they would seek additional funds. So I would then support the change to my own amendment, and the proposal would be to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety rather than the recommendation going to the National Academy of Sciences. Any other discussion? Member Graham, you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. I'd still have a friendly amendment here. And I would propose that it read like this: evaluate the safety outcomes of marketing by automobile manufacturers that emphasize risky driving behaviors, including speeding. The evaluation should compare vehicles based on engine size, power, and performance and international approaches to such marketing. Publish a publicly available report.
So you're only taking out vehicle performance capabilities?
Correct.
I am fine with that, although I would just add that it would be the evaluation should at a minimum compare vehicles. That's something that Highway Safety had asked to be added.
Okay. Yes, I'd be
So
okay
then-
with that.
So then, okay, so that's
Amendment to the
I
amendment.
will repeat, I'll repeat the recommendation. All right. The proposed recommendation for this amendment would be to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, evaluate the safety outcomes of marketing by automobile manufacturers that emphasize risky driving behaviors, including speeding. The evaluation should compare vehicles based on engine size, power, and performance. Oh, shoot. The evaluation should, at a minimum, compare vehicles based on engine size, power, and performance, and international approaches to such marketing. Period. Publish a publicly available report. Is that right?
I'd support that.
Okay. Is everybody else okay with that?
Yep, that works.
Great. Thank you for that change, Member Graham. So the vote is on this amendment, which I offered and Member Chapman seconded. Tom, can council call the roll there?
Yes, this will be a roll call on the revised recommendation to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety as you read it, Chair.
Correct.
Okay. Board, if in favor, say aye. If opposed, say nay. Member Landsberg?
Aye.
Member Graham?
Aye.
Member Chapman?
Aye.
Chair Homendy?
Aye.
Chair, the vote tally is 4 in favor of adopting the proposed amended recommendation.
Thanks very much. And now we will, are there any other amendments to the recommendations? Nope. Any discussion? All right, I have one question on the highway safety plan, just if staff could provide a little information on what you mean by including information on elements to the highway safety plan elements. Include in your highway safety plan elements to identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism. Are you talking about elements under speeding, or what are you thinking about there?
I think we're just talking about different ways, processes, to move that way. So when we say elements, more than one activity. So I could ask Ellen if she has any more, but it's not that specific other than add to the plan items that would affect this outcome.
Did Ms. Lee have anything additional or no?
No, I don't.
So are you talking about, sorry, measures, countermeasures? I'm trying to, I looked at their highway safety plan, so I'm just trying to figure out what you mean by that.
The way we proposed the recommendation, we were intending to have states be able to identify repeat offenders and also to examine countermeasures to reduce speeding recidivism. We recognize that we may not know exactly the approach that they should take, so we were purposely not prescriptive in how we worded the recommendation.
I would just ask then, the recommendation to the 50 states, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and DC, why not just say then identify repeated offenders and reduce speeding recidivism rather than just including elements in the highway safety plan?
I don't have any concerns with that.
Ms. Lee, feel free to disagree. It's good to have this open discussion.
That sounds fine. Yeah, I think we just were viewing that as step one, that if it's not down on paper somewhere in the public domain, they probably won't do it.
So for the highway safety plan, what if they include it in their plan and don't do anything? Is there a action that DOT can take if they don't implement something in their highway safety plan?
Not to my knowledge. Certain items in the highway safety plan are linked to NTSB funding opportunities, and this would not fall under that. So there wouldn't be something necessarily that they could withhold funding for in this case.
All right, I would be interested in some discussion with the board members. Do you have any concerns with it just saying your highway safety plan? I've seen so many highway safety plans and strategic highway safety plans that it's just in a plan and that's as far as it goes.
I'm not sure I understand the distinction of what word. You're obviously having a problem with elements. Do you have another word or something that you would prefer to include?
Well, I asked about elements, and what I heard from staff, and please correct me, was that you wanted some action by the states to identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism. My question then is, why not outright recommend that they do just that rather than put it in a plan? Because they could put it in a plan and not do anything, or we recommend that they actually do something straight out.
Oh, okay.
Tom, are you? Yep.
I understand conceptually what you're saying. I'm not sure how that translates into revised wording here. Could we go over that?
Yeah. I mean, so when I asked, I think the recommendation was that states be able to identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism. I think we could say take action to identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism, or just identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism without saying put it in a plan.
Yeah.
You could strike the first part of that.
Yeah, I understand that, and I would support that.
I would likewise. It's all about doing something as opposed to planning to do something.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. So there is a proposal. The amendment would be to strike include in your highway safety plan elements 2, and the recommendation would be to the 50 states, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia, identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism.
I'd second that.
All right, staff?
So one concern I just had when you said that was one advantage of having it in your highway plan elements is it's closable. Kind of the way it was said, it seemed open-ended, identify, and that was my only concern.
I definitely understand that, but you could put something in a plan and then walk away from your plan.
That's true. That's true.
I could go through so many plans and of states and.
I'm fine with it as how you proposed, Chair.
Other members, good?
I am
Chap-
likewise. I would just ask Dr. Malloy, do you have any suggestion for how to make it closable? Because I do understand your concern.
Can I hear it again? I'm sorry.
It would
do you have
just
any?
be.
Do you have a suggestion for how to?
No, I heard your question. I just needed the proposed recommendation.
The proposal would just be the end part of number 6, which is identify repeat offenders and reduce speeding recidivism. Although you might want to say identify repeat speeding offenders and reduce speeding recidivism.
I mean, it could be develop programs to identify.
Develop and implement.
Yes.
Implement programs.
Yes.
To identify repeat speeding offenders and reduce speeding recidivism. How's that?
Can I offer one additional suggestion?
Sure.
And measurably reduce speeding recidivism.
So it would be implement programs to identify repeat speeding offenders and measurably reduce speeding recidivism. Staff?
I think that's got it.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, all right. Member Graham, anything? No?
No,
Okay.
sounds good to me. Thank you.
All right, then council will call the roll on this amendment to recommendation number 6.
All right, board, if in favor, say aye. If opposed, say nay. Member Lansford,
Aye.
Member Graham,
Aye.
Member Chapman,
Aye.
and Chair Homendy.
Aye.
Chair, the vote tally is 4 in favor of adopting the amended recommendation number 6.
Great. Go ahead and stay on because now I'm going to offer a motion to adopt the recommendations as amended.
So moved.
Seconded by Member Landsberg, and we'll go, any discussion? Nope. All right, so then we'll go ahead and call the roll.
All right. Member Lansford,
Aye.
Member Graham,
Aye.
Member Chapman,
Aye.
and Chair Homendy.
Aye.
Okay, Chair, the vote tally is 4 in favor of adopting the proposed recommendations as amended.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move to adoption of the entire final report. Are there any changes to the final report? Any further discussion? Nope. Okay, so
Hey, Chair, excuse me.
I will offer a motion. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Did I just beat you to it?
No, you didn't. I was going to take you up on your offer to bring up one issue,
Okay.
which is that your new recommendation may need a factual finding that isn't fleshed out yet. So the highway safety may want to work on a finding that would relate to that a factual finding that would relate to that recommendation. Or if you could, or they could identify one.
I think you could argue that 12 is related.
Okay.
Let me grab it.
So they may just want to develop language that ties the two together then, because that's yes, repeat speeding is a nationwide problem, and evidence-based countermeasures targeting repeat offenders are lacking. So yes, I think it is tied to it.
Yeah, I think we just need to develop some language just to introduce it. So
in the report?
Yes.
I mean, just instead of it just,
The reason I'm asking is it matters because we already approved the findings, so I would have to change that. So.
Oh, no, I don't think a new finding. I think some language just to transition.
In the report.
Yep.
Yes.
In the report.
Okay. You all will circulate that, and then what we'll do is I will offer a motion to adopt the final report as amended, subject to us all agreeing to whatever this addition is that highway safety will circulate. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Tom?
All right.
Roll call.
Roll call vote. If in favor, say aye. Opposed, say nay. Member Landsberg?
Aye.
Member Graham?
Aye.
Member Chapman?
Aye.
And Chair Homendy?
Aye.
Chair, the vote tally is 4 in favor of adopting the report as amended.
Great. And does any member wish to reserve the right to file a concurring or dissenting statement? Member Graham? Member Landsberg? All righty. Great. So with that, in hearing there's no further discussions, I will state that our deliberations have now concluded. I want to thank my fellow board members for their preparation and participation in today's meeting. We discussed topics that underscore the importance of this investigation and our safety recommendations. As I mentioned, the North Las Vegas crash is the latest in a long line of tragedies we've investigated, where the combination of speeding and impairment played a deadly role. Despite years of advocacy by the NTSB and countless other champions, including those who've lost a loved one or were injured due to traffic violence, progress has been painfully slow and in some cases stalled. That's why it's important to state publicly once again that the NTSB will not give up. We are with you. In fact, we advanced the ball significantly today, issuing 5 new recommendations to NHTSA and doubling down on one from 2017. And we're recruiting new stakeholders to the fight because every single traffic death is 100% preventable. Let me repeat that. These are preventable tragedies. That's not to say there won't be crashes. There will be crashes because humans do make mistakes or engage in risky behavior. Some crashes involve errors in judgment. Some involve dangerous decisions, as we saw today. Still others involve medical conditions. The point is, no one should lose their life or be seriously injured because of those mistakes. All roadway deaths, regardless of human error, are preventable. By building in redundancy at every level, we can eliminate speeding and impaired driving. We can achieve the safe road transportation system we deserve. The one we're all fighting for, the one where 0 people die on our roads. The NTSB won't relent until that's our reality. I'd now like to extend the board's gratitude to our colleagues in the Office of Highway Safety, the Office of Research and Engineering, and the Office of General Counsel for their work over the course of this investigation and in the development of an excellent report. The board extends its appreciation to our colleagues in the Office of Human Resources, Career Development and Training, the Office of the Chief Information Officer, and the Digital Services Division for their vital support of this meeting. I'd also like to thank the Office of Safety Recommendations and Communications for its diligent work and advocacy to improve safety, which will go well beyond today. When acted upon, the recommendations we've issued and reiterated today will save lives. The NTSB looks forward to working with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, 50 states, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the District of Columbia, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, and the following vehicle manufacturers to implement our recommendations: BMW Group, Ferrari USA, Ford Motor Company, General Motors Company, American Honda Motor Company, Hyundai USA, Kia Motors Corporation, Mazda USA, Mercedes-Benz USA, Mitsubishi Motors, Nissan USA, Porsche Cars North America, Stellantis, Subaru of America, Toyota Motor North America, Volkswagen Group, and Volvo Car Corporation. At the same time, NTSB will not stop working to create a safe transportation system where there's no longer a need for our recommendations until there's zero roadway deaths. Thank you. With that, we stand adjourned.